Laos. It is a country located in the southeast region of Asia. It is landlocked in between countries of Thailand to the west, Vietnam to the east, China in the north, and Cambodia in the south. The Laos flag with the three-headed elephant was the flag that represented Laos as a kingdom country, where they were once governed by a royal family in which the king made up the laws that the Laotian people wished to live by. And the flag that you see today, with the red and blue stripes and the white circle in the middle, represents when communists took over the country that was once governed by a royal family. Laos, originally known as Lang Sang, known as the land with a million elephants, was caught in the middle of the Vietnam War and now is known as the Secret War in Laos.
After World War II, when the Japanese finally surrendered, countries that the Japanese took over were finally free from Japanese control. The Secret War consisted of the U.S., Laos, Thailand, and North Vietnam. There were two different sides, the Ba'ath Laos Communist Party, while the Royal Laos Party sided with the U.S. According to Stanley K. Short, in 1954, France continues to wage war to protect its colonial empire in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. For the first time, the U.S. begins to provide the French with economic and military aid. By 1954, the U.S. funded 75% of all the costs of the war. The French had no realistic hope of ever winning. French generals made one last stand at Dien Bien Phu, a valley surrounded by Vietnamese artillery. The U.S. guarantees American support, but domestic political concerns prevent Eisenhower from fulfilling this promise. After the fall of Dien Bien Phu, the Geneva Conference of 1954 agrees to resolve the problems of Southeast Asia in the following ways. First, make Laos and Cambodia independent countries. And two, temporarily divide Vietnam at the 17th parallel. And third, guarantee that North and South Vietnam hold free elections in 1956 to reunite both countries under a single government. Laos was officially neutral but became a battle zone through the Indochina Wars. Thailand soon got involved with the war because they felt if Laos lost to the communist people that they would have been the next victims. With years of bitter revolutionary struggle accumulating in the American Secret War between 1964 and 1973 had left Laos as the most bombed country in the history of warfare. The U.S. trained Laos military to fight against the North Vietnamese military, and they also supplied food, artillery, and aircraft. Laos was caught in between because of the bridge that linked them to Vietnam. Laos was also an interest to South Vietnam. The Geneva Conference made it where Laotian people were neutral, but North Vietnamese forces, however, continued to operate in both northern and southern Laos. Starting in 1954, there were many attempts to force the North out of Laos. Regardless of any agreements or consent, Hanoi had no intention of abandoning the country or its Laotian communist allies. The United States CIA had a plan to disrupt these operations in northern Laos without any direct military involvement. They responded by training a guerrilla force of some 30,000 Laotian hill tribesmen. Mostly were local Hmong tribesmen, along with the Mayan in Khmu, led by Royal Lao Army General Vang Pao, a Hmong military leader. This army, supported by the CIA Preparatory Airline Air America, Thailand, and the Royal Lao Air Force, and a covert air operation directed by the U.S. ambassador to Laos, who fought the People's Army of Vietnam, the National Liberation Front, and their Pathet Lao allies to a seesaw stalemate, greatly aiding U.S. interests in a war. The CIA guerrilla warfare consisted of men and children and were paid pennies a day for their income. The U.S. had their mind made up to bomb a small piece of the bridge closest to South Vietnam that was used extensively by the enemy. As a result, Operation Tiger Hound was initiated in December 1965 using aircraft from the Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and U.S. Marine. The Vietnamese Air Force and the Royal Laotian Air Force were called into this tactical operation in their first use over Laos. There were certain types of soldiers that spied on enemy territory to help Laos from being taken by the North Vietnamese. One of the main sites with the most confrontation was the Ho Minh Trail. It was called a trail, but really was a rundown bridge that linked North Vietnam to Laos in order to get to South Vietnam. It was used to transfer artillery and food supplies for the North Vietnamese. By defending this trail, it saved a lot of lives that were against North Vietnam. Even with all the attempts to slow down North Vietnam, they still managed to overcome the obstacles that were put in their way and triumphantly bring communists into Southeast Asia. When the U.S. withdrew in 1975, they took their support with them, including some of the Hmong soldiers, artillery, and funds, which weakened the Royal Laos Kingdom. With the Royal Laos Kingdom weakened, North Vietnam defeated them and prosecuted all the Hmong soldiers who were part of the U.S. CIA. Some Hmong escaped to Thailand to hide from communists. This was a long, exhausting war that lasted for 30 years. This war killed millions of people that included U.S., Southeast Asian soldiers. Some civilians were killed along the way. The Vietnam War was the longest and most costly war in American history. From World War II through the Cold War, United States policymakers tried to apply the lessons they had learned in Europe to the foreign policy problems of Asia. As a result, the United States foreign policy in Asia was often incoherent, and American intervention in Asian affairs often ended in tragedy. The lecture traces the origins and consequences of Americans' involvement in Southeast Asia.
Still today in Laos, you can find unexploded bombs left from the war. This war not only left Laos to the communists, but they also left the land, its people, and veterans scarred for life.